2 bullets had been fired into his gut and one right between his eyes. The assassins authored the end of the book Henry Liu had been writing. From his modest home in the suburbs of San Francisco, the investigative journalist had been relentlessly attacking the Kuomintang dictatorship in Taiwan, a key United States ally. The hitmen, members of a crime cartel called the United Bamboo Gang, recruited by Taiwan's military intelligence chief, Vice Admiral Wang Shiling, declined payment for the job, seeing themselves as patriots silencing a dangerous communist agent. Later, his wife Helen Liu offered this simple explanation for why her husband was murdered. In Taiwan, people cannot speak freely, and Henry had a big mouth. Earlier this week, police in Canada arrested 3 Indian nationals for the murder of Sikh separatist Hardeep Nijjar, fueling suspicions that India's Research and Analysis Wing, or R&AW, has been targeting Khalistani operatives in the West. The men, alleged to be linked to the crime network of jail gangster Lawrence Bishnoi, are being investigated for their ties to Indian intelligence officers that Canada alleges were involved in Nijjar's assassination. The government of India has angrily denied these allegations, but in recent weeks, senior political leaders have seemed to defend India's right to use covert means against its enemies overseas. Terrorists will be killed in their homes, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said in one recent rally, amid reports that R&AW was eliminating terrorists in Pakistan. For many Indians, enraged by seeing the perpetrators of terrorist attacks from the 1993 bombings to 26/11 sheltering in safe havens in Pakistan, or Khalistan supporters openly calling for violence while sitting in the West, the use of covert means seems a legitimate exercise of power. This anger is not new. Following the bombing of the Indian embassy in Kabul in 2008, then National Security Advisor M.K. Narayanan demanded that India pay Pakistan back, and I quote, in the same coin. Lawyers and political philosophers familiar with the complex history of assassination by nation-states, though, would likely urge reflection on exactly when such force might be used and what its consequences could be. Although I may kill a man, the Renaissance jurist Alberico Gentili counseled the kings and princes of his violent, bloody times, I may not do so by treachery. They listened, as we'll see, for very good reasons. There is no doubt something profoundly spurious about the tone of moral outrage that surrounded reporting of India's alleged assassination campaign. The United Kingdom attempted to kill Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi and murdered Irish terrorists at home and abroad. Israel has long staged targeted killings. The United States itself, lawyer Luis Chiesa and Alexander K.A. Greenwald have persuasively argued, ignored international law when they killed the co-founder of Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, or Colombian drug boss Pablo Escobar. For its part, Russia frequently and most often crudely has been killing regime opponents overseas. Like India, nation-states everywhere have struggled with the question of how to deal with criminals and terrorists when their adversaries choose not to use the law against them. However, the absence of an ethical norm doesn't mean that the many powerful arguments against covert action can be ignored. For most of history, international relations scholar Ward Thomas writes, assassination was used without any scruples. Leaders of the ancient world regarded killing for a public purpose as a moral good, and murder was seen as a legitimate foreign policy tool until well into the 17th century. The American political scientist Hans Morgenthau noted that, I quote, the Republic of Venice from 1415 to 1525 planned or attempted about 200 assassinations for the purposes of its foreign policy. These efforts were even recorded in the official archive along with the payments made. Yet, As the system of modern sovereign states began to emerge, leaders began to confront problems that called for a new set of norms. Former Queen of England and Ireland Elizabeth I was told by her spies in 1584 that Bernardino de Mendoza, Spain's ambassador to London, was involved in a plot to murder her and put her cousin on the throne instead. The Queen's spies, led by the legendary Secretary of State Francis Walsingham, whose codename M, by the way, made its way into popular culture through novelist Ian Fleming, and whose agent John D used to sign his letters 007. Anyway, Francis Walsingham soon crushed the plot, but the problem of the ambassador remained. Gentili counseled the Privy Council against bringing Mendoza to trial. Ending the immunities of diplomatic agents, he warned, would unleash forces that could not be controlled. He was right. King James I's ambassador to Venice, Henry Wotton, was protected against hitmen dispatched by the Vatican after he plotted to bring about a Protestant revolution. Emmerich de Vattel, among the 18th century's most eminent legal commentators, distilled important experiences from these geopolitical crises of the times. There were some, de Vattel accepted, who ought be hanged by the first person into whose hands they fall. Poisoners, assassins, or incendiaries may be exterminated wherever they are caught. Yet for assassination to be justified, it had to be proportionate to the threat and demonstrably serve the purpose of ending a conflict rather than simply perpetuating them. Else, going against another nation state would serve no purpose and would just breed retaliatory violence. For much of the 20th century, these norms held. Very few nation states employed assassination as a tool. The Soviet Union's NKVD intelligence service, which later became the KGB, often killed enemies of the Soviets overseas. But almost all its victims were its own nationals, not foreigners. Locked in war with Japan in 1894-1895, China placed bounties on 3 Japanese generals. The one major assassination, which was of Austrian leader Engelbert Dollfuss by Nazi Germany in 1934, was widely seen as an example of Adolf Hitler's disregard for international norms and really did his image overseas damage. In 1938, the British military attaché in Berlin, Noel Mason Macfarlane, is said to have proposed assassinating Hitler to avert a European war, but was told it would be, I quote, unsportsmanlike. Leaders in London knew that the knives of assassins could cut both ways. Even faced with insurgencies and terrorism, most nation-states respected the unwritten rules. Ireland often declined to extradite terrorists to the United Kingdom, Timothy Duffy has written, arguing their crimes were political offences, not murders. Terrorists also slipped through loopholes in the UK-US extradition agreements. Now, the UK could have hunted down IRA terrorists in those countries, but it knew it would end up damaging important strategic relationships. The territory of the United States should not be allowed to become a hunting ground for foreign governments wishing to stifle dissent. The influential New York politician Stephen Solars, by the way a great friend of India, would say during an official investigation of Henry Liu's murder. 3 years after the assassination in 1984, partly because of pressure from the US, the Kuomintang ended martial law. Israel, international law scholar Louis René Beres has written, was among the few states which continued to assert a right of preemptive self-defense to assassinate overseas. The wide gap between the theoretical presumption of an effective centralized world legal order and the actual condition of a generally weak and decentralized pattern of enforcement, he argued, supports the principle of anticipatory self-defense. Even then, Israel needed to meet a high standard. The country itself agreed that the intended victim must be clearly guilty of a major or egregious crime involving loss of life against the state considering assassination, and that guilt be determined beyond a reasonable doubt in some kind of legal forum. India has had no institutions that can meet this benchmark. Nijjar's name began to regularly surface in Indian counter-terrorism investigations from around 2007. The Ludhiana police named him as one of the plotters who organized the bombing of the Shringar movie theatre that year. The prosecution, however, collapsed with a trial court acquitting the three accused, while a fourth one died in prison. It led to questions being raised in Canada about the credibility of what India was saying against Nijjar. In another case, an associate of Nijjar and the Sikh militant organization Babbar Khalsa International was granted bail by the Punjab and Haryana High Court after prosecutors failed to produce evidence to support their allegations. There have been no legal proceedings in India against several of the terrorists reputed now to have been killed in Pakistan by Indian intelligence agents. Targeted killings sure can degrade terrorist threats, but they're no magical solution. Israel's execution of opponents did not prevent the outbreak of the first Palestinian Intifada, nor the intensifying cycle of violence that's followed up to the present day. Assassinations of IRA personnel, we know, intensified terrorist violence rather than diminishing it. And targeted killing did not end jihadist terrorism in Iraq or Afghanistan, or indeed prevent the defeat of the United States and its allies. Ever since 1975, when Senator Frank Church's committee investigated abuses of power by America's intelligence services, it's also been known that covert action programs can easily degenerate into a threat to the very societies they are intended to defend. Few can dispute that India has the right to act against individuals who have harmed its citizens. However, the tools to kill must be controlled by state institutions which can gather credible evidence and make reasoned judgments on whether it justifies the use of covert force. Like Israel and the United States, India must ensure political leaders, not spies themselves, assume final legal responsibility for decisions to kill. Killing can be something of a dangerous addictive drug, as the experience of centuries teaches us. And like all drugs, it can extract a painful price for the short-lived emotional gratification it delivers. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor at ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.